Should we be live now? How's it going, Jace?
Good, thank you. How are you this morning?
Good. Obviously, I don't do a proper intro, so just bear with me. We'll wait
That's
for a
fine.
few people to sort of jump in and get started, and then we can jump through the plan for today. But how's your week been?
Good, good. Busy one. Love seeing this nice weather coming on now. Moving out of winter. Bit frustrated. It's getting a bit hot though. Don't have the
Yeah,
water near me like you, so we don't have that nice cool breeze here.
yeah.
But it's good.
Uh,
Good
It's
weekend. Good week. So
it caught me off guard yesterday because we went like to the shops to do some errands and stuff, and
yeah,
I think it was like 33, so it's not even that hot, or it's anywhere near as hot as it gets. But it just having been so cold and then jump you straight into that heat, it's too
I think
much.
I
So.
think it is. Haven't adjusted to that 30-degree weather yet, so it's a big shock.
And we've had it's obviously a lot colder for you guys down there, but
Oh, it's
like
not that
it's been
much
such a
colder. We've
cold
had.
winter. It's been so cold. Canberra's a lot colder. I went down there for a few footy
Yeah.
games and died basically.
Oh
We
yeah.
lost them all
We did
too,
get
so it
that.
makes the drive
that
makes the drive even
Oh,
worse. But
we lost last week too, though, at least. So neither of us won. So
yeah. Well, I was very happy to see Newcastle lose last night. I'm that kind of fan,
uh,
by the way. I take a lot of
I am too. I was quite disappointed. I thought there was a terrible showing from them.
yeah, yeah.
So I was like, oh, I wonder what would have happened if Canberra made it.
Well, they won what 11 in a row, right, or 12 in a row.
Forget it.
Newcastle, I think. Yeah. So
Yeah,
and they're not that good of a team anyway. So
no,
I'm hoping the Warriors get up though.
be a
I'll
good
be disappointed
story.
if.
I just they travel so bad though. So unfortunately now, everything's going to be, across the ditch over here. So
Yeah, I think they've won like 3 of their last 4 at Brisbane at Suncorp, from what I
yep,
recall. Um, I just hope they get there. I don't want to see Penrith win, and I don't want to see
mm.
Brisbane win, purely because
Uh,
I'm like, because it actually could have been our chance, right? Parramatta's chance, or it could have been Canberra's chance this year to be like sort of a bad good team and
yep,
win.
to get there.
And now some other teams gonna get lucky. And
Unfortunately, I think they're just too good. I think that top two is just clear cut
yeah,
above. So I don't see anyone
yeah,
getting in there except for Penrith and Brisbane.
yeah. I think Penrith win it, unfortunately. So it'll be 3 in a
Yeah.
row. That's very
No, they're
annoying.
that good. They're that good. They're the
Yeah.
Patriots of the NRL. So
Oh, I hate it. I hate it so much because they used to be such a bad team. It sort of came out of nowhere. And we've got a few
I think
people
it's
in the
the.
charity patches. You
I
what
was
were you
going
going
to say
to
it's
say, sir?
it's consistency, right? Like, as someone who is a long-term Raiders fan, I actually appreciate Bellamy, for example.
Yeah.
Cleary. I think last night they were talking about every coach now in that Final Four, have been either an understudy for Bellamy or the assistant coach has, for
Yeah, it's
example, or they've
unreal.
been under Cleary. Yeah,
Yeah. It's unreal. And then with you know, the whole Penrith situation, being a Parramatta fan, it's even worse, obviously, because they're a close rival. But I think they've lost like 10 games or something in 3 seasons, or maybe a little bit more, and we've beat them
yeah.
on like half of those occasions. So it's just insane to me. But they're
It
such a
is.
good football team, and it's so weird how
Yeah.
they can be that good in a salary cap league like we have. And for everyone sort of wondering, we're talking about rugby league here in Australia, so popular sport played on the East Coast, and it's like heavily salary cap enforced.
There
But
is obviously there are
yeah,
ways around that though, and
yeah,
that's the
definitely.
problem. There's a lot of free
Yeah,
gifted houses and vehicles and
yes,
stuff that add on to the
yeah.
people's salaries that you don't see.
Yeah, I've talked to the Melbourne Storm example with the Eels getting screwed over in 2009, and
Mm.
then you got players getting boats and second
Yep.
houses and getting paid to attend sponsorship events that they never attended, all this sort of stuff. So it's a lot of dodgy stuff there, but it's like
Oh, definitely.
I think it's crazy for people overseas to understand because our cap is only like 9 million Australian dollars or $10 million, whatever it is, which when you're talking about salary cap leagues in the US, there's so much money there that if you're going to cheat it, it's
Well,
probably a lot harder because the money is so much bigger.
even
When I
then
say a
though,
lot,
right? They're allowed to exceed the salary cap. They just pay,
yeah, yeah.
pay the tax, luxury tax. So
Mm. Yeah, but if you've got a team here cheating the cap and they're going to give someone 1.5 with like half of that off the books, that makes a big difference, right? To a team that can only pay
sure
a
it
little
does.
bit. So you got Zar Crazy One, I think is how you pronounce his name. I've met him a few times. He's quite good. He had a chat with me in the DMs just before this because he got some thoughts on serial numbered cards, which we'll get to in
Oh,
a sec. So I'll give everyone a quick intro. You can see the title for the video. It's talking about serial numbers, or again, talking about them being a lie. That's a bit tongue-in-cheek. We'll get to that a little bit later on. And then also pop reports, because I think they're two interesting discussions. I've talked to Jason on this in the past. He's helped me with some content for some videos. And there's a few things here that I think are quite good to talk to because not a whole lot of people look at it through this lens. So we'll get to that in a sec, but I thought it'd be good to maybe give a bit of an intro at the start to understand a bit more about you before we jump into that sort of thing. So maybe you can tell everyone, what you collect, how you got into collecting, and then we can jump through some other questions.
Sure. So, as you might have seen, I'm a big Russell Westbrook collector, actually. So, with my Instagram that you mentioned in the thumbnail, Russ Westbrook cards. But as a child, I think I collected like most people. So, that good memory, and I think you've mentioned this before, the memories and those time and places you can put yourself in is what makes it great about the hobby. I remember starting in 1991, just before Shaq started, basically, and really collecting for sort of, 6 solid years there, going into that local comic book shop that I had nearby. Buying those single packs that cost, $4.95 back then, of various basketball card packs. Didn't know what was good back then, but, just bought those packs as they came out. Started then, moved into TCG. So I collected quite a bit of Magic the Gathering back then, played that in school. So that was a big interest too. And that's where the sort of memories came from. I think like most people, I sort of, dropped off then during those sort of, late teen years. And I really re-entered back like most people, I would say, at the start of COVID. A lot of people want to say they've been long-term collectors, but how true have they been? I guess have they been consistently buying the whole way through? And I don't really think they have. So, I'm one of those sort of people. I did sort of re-enter during COVID as an interest, with that time that everyone got. It was good to come back then. And I think as an adult now, I guess it's being able to go back to those childhood interests and actually buy those things that you couldn't afford, whether that's, cards, whether that's, arcade games, old games you had on a SNES, for example, or the original Nintendo, something like that. So I think I've sort of, come from that stage, and now I sort of got to this sort of collecting journey over especially these last few years, where I've gone from, buying all these things to now looking at what people sort of say as a various phase, as a consolidation. So now shrinking my collection down a bit now to more specific sort of items.
Yeah, I think I'm in the same boat, to be honest, with a lot of that stuff, which is cool. Do you find you go through phases with what you do collect though? Is it like always?
I do. I definitely.
Because you had the comment there around, like, people say they've been collecting their whole life or they've been in cards their whole life, but how true was that if they've been buying the whole time? Like for me, I go through like periods where I'm buying heavy into cards for, a few years, and then I get maybe a little bit bored of that. I'll still collect it, but not be super heavy. And then I'll target, I've got like hot toys behind me, video games, all that sort of stuff. So
same sort of thing. I definitely do. I go through those phases. Like I said before, I'm on the lookout nowadays for the arcade games from the 90s, like the big proper arcade games that I used to love playing at it. Those, Intensity and those sort of things, Kingpin, those sort of things that existed. I would say that my sort of, trend of buying definitely changes, throughout my time of PCing, Russell Westbrook. I've gone through and bought a lot of stuff, and now I'm sort of in that same thing, starting to consolidate those down to some key things I like around him, and starting to move into, okay, what are potential things I could keep long term?
Yeah.
One of the things I try and collect are goats, and I think this from some of the stuff we've discussed.
Yeah, which is like, it's interesting too, because I think it's like a thing that most collectors go through, where you go through periods where you buy a lot and then you consolidate down and be a bit more targeted. You see it with a lot of these high-end collections as well, where people are very, very targeted. And it's obviously hard to do that, especially if you're somebody that wants to scratch the itch all the time to buy things. But I'm going through a very similar phase right now with flawless soccer.
Precisely, and I think that's part of everyone's journey, right? I don't think anyone comes in and starts at that consolidation phase. So, you go through and buy, hundreds of different cards. Part of that learning experience really is you go, okay, come back to it later on and wish I didn't buy this or buy this, and you start to sell those things and to buy something new. It's very rare for someone to, buy something and have it forever. You do change, just like a vehicle.
Yep, that very good point. And it's why, like, I approach my collecting the way that I do. I've talked about it heaps of times, where I'll, buy really only buy things with profit where I can, for the most part, so that when phases do change, or I do decide to sell something, because I go through phases like crazy. If I do decide to sell something, I'm not impacted by the price at the moment, because I've already basically paid for it with profits, or I've already made the money back. So if I do need to sell it, there's no guilt there, which I think a lot of people sort of fall into the trap of as well. So do you approach your collecting like that
Yeah,
as well? Or do you
I
take?
wish I did. I think you've got a great strategy there. I wish I had that strategy. I think I'm probably more like the norm, where people have bought things and they've sort of decreased in value, or those sort of things. And I wish I had your mentality and strategy. I think it's something that people should get into. Again, this is obviously a hobby overall. Even though people say it's a hobby, I think it's more about money nowadays. But
Yeah,
there is a
definitely.
whole lot of monetary value to things. So I think if people are worried about that sort of thing, it's good to try and use a strategy like you've got, that you only use that card money and you sell things, whether it's a loss or a gain, and reinvest or repurchase things with that income.
Yeah, and like I have, I'm quite like I don't know if like strategic with what I do buy as well, because you'll see me. I'm quite eclectic with what I do like, so I'm not just collecting sports cards like you mentioned, like TCG. I'm sort of into everything, and I'm pretty big in comic book collecting as well. So I've always found I've had a good eye to spot things. So
Yeah.
like the example of when I bought that Andrea Pirlo card, I think it cost me $1,000 Australian. But I had some other things that were random pickups that ended up paying for that purely because I had my finger on the pulse in different areas, which I think most, or I shouldn't say most collectors, but it seems to be like an older school approach for collecting that people have, where they're across different things. But it just makes it so much easier when it comes to
I
buying things you want or having to sell things.
I agree, and I think that's part of my sort of collecting style. As I said before, I collect a lot of goats across various sports. I'm not into just one sport. I do watch a lot.
Mm.
I'd say soccer is probably my biggest interest in terms of cards, even though I've got a big NBA collection. But I do try and have various stars across all different sports. And it tends to be old stars for me as part of my sort of collecting journey.
Yep.
Reason for that is, I don't like to go for this whole prospecting thing that people do. I get that it's an exciting sort of gamble. You get to see the people play, see how they go, and go up with the trends. But my personal view is I don't see people nowadays like, say, Burrow or Herbert or Ja Moran or any of those sort of people, Pedri in soccer.
Mm.
They've got no chance of really replicating those previous stars' efforts. They're never
Yeah.
gonna replicate LeBron or MJ or Brady or Messi. As much as people like to disagree and argue that point, it's just not possible for them in today's age to actually go out and win 6 titles.
Yeah, or change the culture of the sport, which I think is like the bigger one,
Correct.
right? It's a weird one because people put it down to like where the market is or where the hobby is over the last 2 to 3 years or 4 years, whatever it's been now since it blew up. But I was having the same thoughts back in like 2013, 14 when people were going crazy for like Victor Oladipo and
Mm.
like Wiggins and all these other players over that 3 to 4 year stretch. And I used to sit back
Yep.
there and think like, what the heck are you guys doing? And I was actively at the time, buying on card autos of Hall of Famers and all that sort of stuff, which I sold back in 2018. So way before I could have
Just
made a
before.
fortune off them. But it's just weird how it's always been around and people have always had that mindset. And it goes down to the excitement, like you said. But in reality, I don't see where that
Yeah.
goes long term.
I don't see it either, but it is that excitement. People just like to say, "Hey, this is the next big thing." The problem is, every year, 3 or 4 stars come through. When I say stars lightly, people
Yeah.
who are the showy, new, shiny thing who put up good numbers. I'll look at Morant for an example. He's a great player, but what's the odds of him winning, 6 titles or something like that? What's the odds of him winning 3 titles? And people like to make a debate that he can get there, but how much can he do? How's he going to get past, Steph Curry, Giannis, Jokic, Anthony Edwards, Luka Doncic? He's got to get through all those teams year after year in multiple series to get a title, let alone 3. And that's not even considering, new stars that came out last year or
Exactly.
this year or the next year. So it's just the feats that those goats have achieved. So Brady, LeBron, Michael Jordan, it's just not going to be replicated.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's just got a funny one here about Will Greer. It's always a good one.
Oh, I love that one.
Villager,
Yep.
even Willis.
I do
But
watch a
it's just
lot of SCI.
yeah, he's good for that kind of stuff as well. As in good for information as well, not just the funny stuff. I was going to say, like, in the instances where you've got guys that are speculating on certain players as well, like you've got Jokic as an example where he still isn't even, as valued as what he should be, right? So you've got a case here of a guy that's a bit more modern, doing really good things, and then the market still doesn't pay for him like they probably should. And you've got
Yep.
new guys coming in that are not even going to get to Jokic's level, and they've already passed him in pricing. It's just weird.
Correct. And that's always been the way, right? Look at the one of the biggest underrated people, I think, is Shaq. Shaq didn't really have any standout rookie card in 1992, was a bit of a junk max era. So there's no artificial rarity, I'll call it, numbered cards like that too much. But he's underappreciated. He's a big man. He doesn't have that flashy showness that people do. However, I do think probably 10, 20 years away, that will be someone that people come back to and realize, hey, he was really that great. Same as they've realized about Bill Russell nowadays and those sort of things.
Yeah. You got Parabellum again here saying many underrated players and even legends. And I think, honestly, I think it's going to stay the same for the most part, outside of a select few players. I think people like what they like, and if the price hasn't changed, I don't think it's going to change ever, to be honest.
No. And I think it's about, like you said, though, it's about what you like. Some people like collecting those legends and those goats, people who have achieved all those things. Other people want to purchase cards and get that adrenaline rush, I guess, of day-to-day, games happening and potential injuries and ups and downs and ebbs and flows.
Yeah. And
I think that's...
So go. Yep.
Oh, sorry. I was going to say, I think that's sort of how I've always approached my collecting too. Like same with PC cards, we all like to collect, I guess. Even though many of us say we don't see it as an investment, I think that we all do care about the value of cards overall. None of us want to pay $200 for something and see it decline to $50.
Exactly.
And the way I've approached it, is that, as long as you're happy, paying that price, $200, if it declines or increases, it doesn't matter overall, as long as you were happy with whatever you paid at the time.
Yeah, that's why I think I'm sort of extra targeted as well when it comes to things like on-card autos, match worn stuff. Because as, a fan of those players or of that sport, I can sort of feel like I've got a piece of something that's a bit more than what just a card is. So that's the stuff that I target as well.
I was going to say, similar to you, I guess I collect Rarity is my thing. And I sort of try to look at what's happened in other sort of, I don't like saying markets, but other sort of areas of interest around the world, So, cars, for example, oil cans, signs, all those things. We sort of seen over history, the rarer an item is, generally the higher the value can potentially be. It doesn't really mean that all cards that are technically rare will be valuable, but it does help.
Yeah, definitely. I think this might be a good segue into the next talking point, or the main talking point being serial numbers. I'll get to that in a sec. So Jedi J is basically saying, it may seem wild your channel is being viewed in the great state of Iowa. I don't believe anyone else outside the UA has what you have. I'm not sure what you're referring to there, but that's appreciative, and it's pretty cool that the internet can bring us all together like that.
I think Iowa might have just lost in the college football. They had a tense game going on just before.
Oh, was that today? I saw some tweets about that I think it was. So commiserations if they did lose, and you are an Iowa fan. Both our teams lost in the NRL this year. I didn't even get to lose because we didn't even make the finals. But I
would say something too interesting about you collect for your story, your journey. Knowing something's had an impact, whether it's a title year, things like that. I think something, and I see a lot of other content creators talk about this too, is that rarity and scarcity thing. A lot of people see something as rare and don't understand the difference between rarity and scarcity. That rarity can be something that not many were produced, or people even see rarity as only 5 of these have been graded. Doesn't mean it's necessarily rare. Or the artificial numbering of cards and that artificial rarity, but that scarcity thing about that not many exist, and there's going to be greater demand for that overall. And I think that's sort of where you're going to a printing of numbered cards. That's a real particularly important thing when it comes to the overprinting of cards in today's era. We really need to know about that scarcity more so, and say, hey, look, what's the demand going to be on these items, and based on how rare they are.
Yeah, definitely. I'll click through a couple of comments and we can jump into that, because I always look at it through the lens of, what would the collector actually want at the end of the day? And that's how I try and work through what would be something people would want long term. You've got Parabellum here talking about Trey Lance, happy to pay what he did recently for his cards, because I think they've gone down quite a lot, right? Invest in Ben Simmons. It's actually pretty funny. So Ben Simmons is probably the most hated man in Australia, I'd say, from a sports perspective. He's been turned off really hard. People went wild for him when he obviously made his debut. I think Melbourne, correct me if I'm wrong, has the most #1 draft picks now out of any city in the world, with Bogut, Ben Simmons, and I believe also Irving was born here.
Technically he was born in Australia.
So I think that makes them the #1 city. So that was just a random thought, but he was bought really heavy, and now he's a bit of a dickhead. So
I would say something too. Yeah, Tampa Bay, Brady. Speaking of Brady, I would say one of the things, particularly, is especially before you get into the amount of print runs, for example, and serial numbers and all those sort of things. I think the other reason I sort of care about the GOATs nowadays is that not many cards were produced for them. Even if we look at Jordan and the debate over Star and Fleer and all those sort of things, there was only minimal number actually produced. You go back to Bill Russell or Wilt Chamberlain in the NBA, there was 2 cards for Wilt, for example, 1 for Bill Russell. As I said before, being a soccer collector, I look at things like, and I've got one here for you just to see, but, Maradona, he only had 1 true POG disc from his rookie, which was considered 1977. But then had 4 cards in 1978, which also get considered as a rookie year, but that's it. There's 5 sort of sets that exist for him, and that's it. And that's sort of how I like to look at things myself. I want to go back and go, hey, I don't want 50 sets of this player existing, because you don't know what's going to be sought after in the future, and you have more chance when there are less sets that exist.
Yeah, definitely. I'm not sure. Have you know what this is about from Upper Deck? So I appreciate you joining, Mr. Professor, but I'm not sure.
Yeah, Young Guns is the hockey. So Young Guns was a big set. So it's I'm assuming that Sports Card Professor is talking about the hockey in NHL. Basically, that Young Guns is the key sort of. So Upper Deck was the key base set. You had your autos and stuff like that for different issues. But Upper Deck released a base set and then a Young Guns, which was sort of your key rookie cards, and they have different variations as part of those, and they bring in some big money. Austin Matthews, Connor McDavid, for example, who are, I don't know if you know them, but 2 superstars.
I've heard those names,
yeah. So sort of 2016, 2017 sort of rookies who are haven't really won anything yet except for sort of MVPs. But some of their sort of Young Guns rookies pull in some big money, especially the numbered variants.
Yeah. I watch a lot of Jeremy Lee and his lives and stuff like that, so he talks. That's where I know the names from, because I don't know much about hockey, but they have some really nice looking sets, to be honest. Very nice looking stuff.
Definitely.
So. Especially the older stuff. I think there's a set called the Cup or something along those lines.
The Cup. Really nice the Cup's a very expensive set. Yeah, so it's more like, I'd say, sort of again your flawless sort of unique sort of stuff in NBA.
Yeah, I'm really into flawless at the moment, which is not good for the wallet, but
I try keep on top of all sports. Especially American more than Australian. To be honest, I keep my sort of, Gretzky sort of things, again, people who have played, they've achieved things, their records might be beaten one day, but if it's going to be beaten, it's by 1 or 2 people max, it's really to actually see that.
Yeah, I feel like I'm too priced out a lot of that stuff. Like, I think it's justified for sure, the value on some of these things, because they are so rare, and obviously not many people kept them around. So maybe scarce is the better word. But I just try a bit more targeted with what I'm buying in terms of,
correct. And that's the thing, right? What's your interest overall? Some people want to, get a Russell Westbrook card, for example, or some people want to get a lower grade, Gretzky rookie for the same price. And that's the thing, I just like to have even a low grade of those sort of things because they are sort of, iconic sort of cards.
Yeah, definitely. So like serial numbered sports cards, maybe we can start with that, because it's been like a hot topic, I think, in recent weeks, where you've had, I put out a video on it again, following some videos by the Sports Card Dad and a few other people talking about these once again. And you helped me with a video. It would have been like maybe 4 or 5 months ago now, maybe less than that, talking about why people maybe need to be a bit more targeted with what it is they're buying, because when people look at a serial number, they'll see, like, I've got some random cards here that I just happen to have on my desk from Select Euro 2020. Got a Federico Bernardeschi over here, nothing super exciting. I'm tie-dye out of 25. So as an example, somebody might look at that being an out of 25 card and think it's really awesome. But if it's, a basketball player in a basketball set, how many other serial numbered cards are released for that player in that 1 year versus then how many in every other year afterwards? And it seems to be something that a lot of people aren't focusing in on, and they're sort of just looking at the sole number on the back of the card, not realizing that the population of those is actually a lot bigger than what they actually think.
Yeah, definitely. I'd start, if you want to talk about that, I'd sort of say, this issue sort of came about with this overprinting and overpopulation. That's something we're seeing, especially today. We've seen it sort of since 2019. If we look at Prism, for example, and the NBA as a target sort of point, 2017 was where we started to see increases in print runs. That being obviously the amount of variants and cards that were produced. And that's where we sort of saw that massive sort of increase in what people consider to be rare numbered cards. When we talk about that, I would say that, as a good sort of resource for people out there, something like sort of Cardboard Connection, if they haven't visited that website before, where they can see a set checklist, is amazing. That's where you can go and you can start to go through different years and really see where that change started to happen. And I think a big thing about that is that, as I said before, about scarcity and demand, this overprinting starting to become a bit of an issue nowadays. It's really unlikely that the number of print runs and stuff like that meet the true demand going forward. So I can only see a sort of, downward spiral there.
Yeah, especially because I look at it through the lens, and this is probably a good distinction to make that I don't think I've mentioned in the videos, but I mentioned it earlier. I look at it through the lens of like the collector, right? So I see the collector as being the person that's going to establish the floor for the price of a card. And if you're talking about like Tom Brady gold prisms as an example, like there's been 10 years of prism now. He's got at least 10, excluding the other gold parallels that are in there now. Is a collector, if the market was to shrink, going to want to buy, a 10th year Brady prism and over everything else, right? Or is that 10th year gold Brady prism, I think is a better question, going to be worth the same as a second or third year? Again, probably not, based on what people have shown they like. And that's not to mention that these future releases aren't going to be worth money or anything like that. It's more so just putting it through that lens, because the numbers that maybe you'll talk to in a sec that I can bring on screen now, if you highlight that a little bit, that it's not as clear cut.
Yeah, exactly. And I'll give an example of a couple of different players in a bit, but like I think it really starts with print runs, right? That's before we even get to the serial numbering, just understanding what's changed in print runs. As I said before, Cardboard Connection sort of gives a real good guide for people to have a look at Rarity, and that's by the ordering of variations in a set. There's a good example here. And 2012 was the iconic Prism set, in NBA and NFL. Looking at something like this, we sort of see silver prisms and green prisms being the sort of only variants besides gold in that set. One of the useful things about Cardboard Connection is that they generally order cards in their checklist based on rarity. In this example for 2012, green prisms are actually much more rare than silver. And most people don't realize that. It can be because the silver is generally a more desirable card to many. But I think a lot of people just think the silver's rarer because as sets went on, green started to get printed more. But back in the prior years, sort of pre 2017, for example, green was a much rarer card. Might not have that appetite for people, but it really is. And we sort of see it there, right? That's the checklist for you there. But you sort of go through, in 2012, there really was only 3 variants. You had the silver, you had the green, which was, like I said, rarer than the silver, and then the gold. No blacks, no other variants. So I think this is something why, that sort of era it is a lot more iconic and sought after than eras nowadays too.
Yeah, definitely. It also has the benefit of being the first year product as well, which
correct
is a personal favorite of mine in terms of what I do like to chase.
An interesting thing for you though is, as I said before, so 2017 is when we started to see a major change. And again, I'm just looking at Prism here, isolated to Prism, because that is, I guess, the most iconic, common base sort of set people know about. Obviously you've got a whole lot of other sets, Flawless, National Treasures, Optic, everything out there. But using a sort of common baseline, Prism really was 2017 where there's a big change. As I said then, in 2012, there was only the green, the silver, and the gold. 2017, you can start to see on the screen there's sort of 18 different numbered variations. So that's excluding the silver, the green, the hyper, all those things, which were, again, in 2012. But we've sort of gone now from one numbered variation set, to 18, which is quite, astounding to me.
Yes.
But again, it only gets worse, right?
Yes, much worse.
Exactly. When we go to 2018, for example, we saw another 7 numbered variations get thrown into that. Plus, they also brought in the choice boxes. So as you can see there, the choice boxes brought in those additional variants, the blue, yellow, green, the tiger. And to me, that's going, okay, so we've sort of gone from 18 to say 30 different what people consider to be rare or a hit out of a box. So that's another astounding sort of thing. Then we continue on, you get to 2019. This wasn't too bad. It sort of stayed pretty static between 2018, same number, 25 numbered variations. But what they did instead was they added in these new variants for raw cards, so the ices, for example. The white sparkles already exist, but it's all these additional sets like the waves, the purple wave, the ruby wave, all those sort of things, which is pretty sort of crazy to see too. Then we sort of, fast forward a bit, which it gets even more sort of scary, and that's the 2022 set. So looking at 2022, we're up to 35 numbered variants now, and again, that's not even including the new ice variants they've got in there. They also added in these new sparkle variations, that get people excited. So you got the sparkle prisms in there. It's just crazy, right? We've sort of doubled since 2017. We've gone up 35 times, and that's, people will hit a Paolo, for example, and I've got a slide on Paolo in a second for you, but they'll hit a Paolo and it'll be a red ice or something, and they get super excited. So you look at all those variations at the top: pink ice, red, white, blue. They get excited. They've hit the number one rookie and not a base card. But it's just crazy how many other variants exist that are technically more valuable and more rare.
Yeah, and like you said, that's just from one set too, and it's
correct.
People will counter it by basically saying, well, there's so many more people in the hobby now, so it's sort of justified to have this many parallels, which I do agree and disagree with. I think I mainly disagree with that because the volume here is just crazy, and like Jay said, it's basically one product. So when you've got that many cards out there being released every single year, not to mention the short prints that are not numbered, that are probably just as high in terms of volume as these, how are you going to find things that people will actually want long term? Because if this growth continues over the next couple of years, like you expect it to, especially with Panini about to lose the license, what's going to happen with those cards? People are going to be buying a card, and you'll probably talk to this in a sec, but that is out of 100, but is it really out of 100, or so on and so forth?
And let's look at that example, right? Like if someone wants to collect Paolo, he's a great player, won Rookie of the Year, and statistically, whoever wins Rookie of the Year, I think it's something like 80% of those players become a Hall of Famer in the end. So he's likely to be a great player. But if you're buying an out of 100 prism of his, how many better cards might exist in the future based on how many people are going to be seeking him? Look at Flawless, look at National Treasures, look at Immaculate, all those RPAs that exist and those things. I think they're always going to be more sought after than something like this. So it just falls way down. And you've got to have that demand base then. Is there going to be that many collectors out there looking after, Paolo from the Magic, who don't normally have a big supporter base outside of Shaquille O'Neal's days?
Yep.
I just don't see it, unfortunately, which is sad. And I think a lot of people, I'm not a fan of the word denial, but they just don't want to understand what exists out there because they might feel bad that they've bought one in the past or something like that. And that's not a problem at all. I think it's just the awareness, just making sure, hey, look, if you are buying these things, to know what exists out there.
Yeah, and it's not to say, like you said, that it's sort of you're stupid for buying these, because obviously if you like it, buy it, and it's good for PCs because you've got so many more options now and so many, like, I guess, cool parallels and so many different things for you to try and chase that you want. But it's more so for the people that are spending, big money, right? Because a lot of these things, especially for rookies, are quite expensive. And they're spending thousands of dollars thinking it's going to be worth that much, down the line, when in reality, the volumes are getting more and more crazy. So how rare is the thing you've actually got in your hand? And more importantly, if things were to hit the fan, are people actually going to want to pay that when all things are said and done? And that's where I think the bigger question comes in as well.
Agreed. And I think one of the things to factor in about print runs too is also the pop reports, right?
Yep.
And I think you've spoken about this before.
Yeah, this is a big one. I've seen, I think, GemRate's doing something pretty interesting here that I'll talk to once you're
Yeah, that's fine. But I was just going to say, pop reports, they're there for a variety of reasons, but they tend to be pretty misleading, especially for new people. And I think that's something that catches new collectors out. People, I love it. So I'm just sort of Bob Boozle's comment. Exactly. But people see a population on a card and they aren't aware of the actual population or potential population that exists. I sort of mentioned before that, with the rarity thing, people might say, pop 4 of a card. Now, is it a pop 4 because it's quite rare, or is it a pop 4 because no one's bothered grading that card because it's not worth anything? There's a demand around grading too. One of the other things is, if someone sees, say, a pop 10 on a PSA 9 for a card, that they aren't normally focused on other grading companies as well. They don't consider the fact that, you also have, BGS 9s, for example, CGC 9s, which should really be considered as part of that sort of, that artificial rarity population that exists.
Yep.
That's not even considering, those things are graded higher, And what I mean by that is, let's say a PSA 9 is a pop 10, just within PSA in isolation, you also need to consider that population of PSA 10s that exist and add that to it.
Exactly.
If there's 11 PSA 10s that exist, there's really, then you've actually got 10 PSA 9s plus 11 PSA 10s. So you're actually more likely to have a population of, 21. And then you need to go, BGS 9.5s, BGS 10s, SGC 9.5, SGC 10s. It's just something that people don't really consider at all.
Yeah, and I think a lot of people do it by choice. Just before I give my thoughts on that, I've got a comment here from Crown Jewel Cards talking about other cards from lower end products like Score Football possibly affected as well. I would think it'd be more products like NT or Immaculate. I'll give my thoughts and then you can talk to that, Jace. But I do think they are as well, because what happens is we're just talking about Prism here, but then you've got things like, Spectra and Mosaic and Select and all these other products that I can't think of right now, not to mention things like Hoops for basketball, right? So you've also got the same thing happening in each of those sets, and you've got people, buying Hoops, and they're buying a parallel out of 200 in Hoops, but then there's, 5, 6, 7 other products that are more relevant than Hoops, or maybe more, I shouldn't say relevant because people like Hoops. I'm one of them, but the average person might put a greater value on things like Prism, Flawless, and all this sort of stuff, and they're going to be basically paying the money for those before they get to that numbered parallel in Hoops.
Correct. And I do the same thing. I've seen a lot of different content creators out there do really good things around tiers, right? And it tends to go down a tier. There will be people who love Hoops, people who love Score, but most people in general will go down a tier list to find what they can afford and where it sort of fits in. Now, right now you might only be able to afford, the fifth tier of product. But, if prices decline with overpopulation and over printing of cards, then you'll be able to afford possibly in the future, tier 2, and you're more likely to buy that one than the tier 5 sort of card. So that's the sort of problem here. People will go and they'll be buying these lower products, which are great. But in the end, they're less likely to be desirable compared to those sort of, those higher end things going forward. Now, in the past, for example, back in, say, 2000 with Tom Brady, that's a little bit of a different story. He did have quite a few rookies, but you do have things like lower end products that had numbered variations of his, and there weren't too many numbered sets that existed, so they were sort of more sought after. It's just as we get more and more printing and more sets nowadays, those lower ones do pop down.
Yeah. And again, there's a comment here from Travis talking about Panini basically making cards for 6 of the 7 continents within the world. Parallels are unfortunately basically needed. I think that's fair. And I think it just comes down to their application of them. There's a way that they need to sort of maintain the volume, but also maintain the scarcity of cards, because essentially what we're seeing here is things are growing so quickly that are there people out there overpaying for some things that maybe shouldn't be? And I think that's basically where we are. And it's a fine line, right? It's a difficult thing to manage, and there's probably no right way to do it. And we're probably on our high horses a little bit talking about this, but it's more so not saying this is really bad. It's basically saying, okay, you as a person that wants to invest in something or buy something, should you really be paying top dollar for something that's out of 100 out of Hoops? Or should you maybe be a little bit more targeted and go for something within Prism that's maybe lower number parallel or has a unique thing to it, as opposed to just being another random card out of 100.
Exactly. There's always going to be a need for parallels. It's just, creating that population increase to match the demand. I think my interest sort of comes in here about, the collector as a whole, trying to inform people about, if they're buying something, just be aware of what else exists and how that might go long term. Again, if it's buying for the PC, you don't care what you spend, that's fine. It's more around just, you're seeing all these people spend a lot of money and lose a lot of money on things because they don't necessarily understand how much exists out there.
Yeah, definitely. Sorry to sidetrack you with the pop report stuff.
That's right. But yeah, this is an example here, and this is more for new collectors. This is a basic thing, as I said before, where someone sees something being a pop 1 sort of card. Granted, it is a pop 1 for a PSA 9. Just putting Giddy up here as being an Australian, obviously. But, just as soon as you go to the PSA register, you sort of see that it's a population of 1, but there are 3 higher. Then you go and look at BGS and you see there's a couple of 10s and a 9.5. So this really is not a pop 1. It's probably the lowest grade that exists of this card, so it's not rare at all. If you are trying to look at comparing different things together of the same card, that rarity, at least through grading, is something that might be worth, sort of looking at buying instead.
Yeah, definitely. Is it gem rate or gem mint? I forget what their
Gem raid, I think it is the one you're talking about,
yeah.
and looking at
Somebody
bringing
sent
together the
me
pop reports.
somebody, was it you that sent me the screenshot or somebody else did, where there's basically some examples already out there now where you search through a card in their platform and you're going to get every pop report for that one card. So instances like this, which again is still something the potential buyer has to go ahead and use, makes it a heck of a lot easier. With the one pull of the thumb, you
Yeah,
can see sort of all
I
the
think
pop
it just
reports combined.
it adds an extra layer, I guess, to that, so people can go and actually see how rare something is that they're getting, or how unique something is. I think it's quite important. A lot of SGC, for example, really hard to find out what exists out there.
Yep.
Beckett's pretty hard too. PSA is pretty good with it. But being able to consolidate all that together to really see, and I think that's more important when we go back from parallels and go back to more base sort of cards to see how many exist. I think it should have been done sooner, but there's probably a reason people haven't wanted to.
Yeah. Well, I think that's the thing. People don't. It seems to be a big trend of people not wanting to do it. I've talked it before as well when it comes to certain flippers in this space, and I'm not going to shit on them now, but they do a bit of a dance where they're just trying to offload things and move things between each other. And I feel like that happens with pop reports too, where
Correct.
they intentionally don't look at it and they pretend it's not part of the conversation because they know that it's maybe not as rare as what they think. And that's not to say people are doing anything disingenuously or anything, but it's just something that
Yeah.
that happens. But
Yeah,
again,
exactly.
it's not there to say you're wrong for doing this or you're an idiot for missing it. It's more so just maybe keep this front of mind when you're going to buy something. It's not just a pop one, because you need to factor in the things that are above it as well, which is a bit disappointing that people don't do.
I think one of the things you like to talk to too is about people regrading cards, right? And how that sort of distorts it a bit too. I think you mentioned last week about people buying, say, a card that's now a BGS 9 but was previously a PSA 6, and why they're buying that, knowing it was a PSA 6 at one point.
Yep.
And those not being removed from the pop reports. Myself, I've regraded cards before, but people don't send in the label with them, because they're not silly. They know if they send in that label, they're going to go, why are we grading it higher now? They're just going to go straight with that grade. So that sort of thing happens. One of the interesting things is about PSA 6s, I guess, and a lot of people don't know, but, do you know why most cards, if they've got a PSA 6, what the reason for that is? Just thinking of PSA. Yeah, so it tends to be normally for PSA 6 is sort of the maximum grade they'll give if there's a crease on a card, for example.
Okay.
So one of those things, a lot of people will buy PSA 6s to try and resub. It tends to be that they can't see a little crease in there, a dent or something like that. I've had a few different cards come back, and then they all come back as PSA 6s because of some little crease that exists. But yeah, that's an interesting fact. A lot of people don't see, why that happens. That's sort of maximum grade they can get if everything else is good.
Yeah, they need to figure out a way to make their labels more tamper-proof, so then people are incentivized to send them back in and then giving them a discount or something. Because obviously, if you're going to go ahead and say, well, if you send back in the labels so we can fix our pop reports, we're going to give you a discount, people are going to start faking labels and sending them in randomly, right?
Yeah.
So they need to figure out a way to sort of avoid that happening, because they need to treat their pop reports with a little bit more respect than what these businesses currently are, I think.
Yeah, it's a tricky problem.
There's a few other comments here. Maybe we can go through those quickly before you jump through. Sports Card Dad posted content from Simon466 Cards that charted from the Card Connection data serial numbers numbering Prism 2012 through 22.
I think one of the best examples of that, and I think to NFL as well, is the number of one-of-ones, right? That's a different topic on its own, but going from, something that used to have, 2 or 3 one-of-ones maximum to, a set having, or a player, I think Joe Burrow had 37 one-of-ones in his rookie year. And you start to question, okay, how rare is that?
Exactly. And that's interesting. So basically they're totaling the serial numbers like that, which is, it's crazy, and people not looking at it through that lens, which I think is the purpose of discussions like this, right? Making sure it's more front of mind so people can be across them. Well, it's tiered high end is high end, yeah. So there are things like that, but again, people don't always look at it through that lens, right? And it's more so to the point of you could be buying a parallel in hoops, as an example. If you're somebody that's purely looking to hold something to make money, right? Because again, this should be a separate discussion from people that want to collect things. If you're buying it purely for money, there could be an NBA hoops insert that is probably worth more than a select insert, as an example, or worth more than a Prism insert in some cases. So would you be better off going for a higher serial numbered card in a more desirable set over a lower one in a less desirable set? Like, again, that's each to their own and depending on the situation. But I think when all is said and done, you might find people preferring the higher end set, even though it's a higher end number.
Yeah, definitely.
Got a few more here. I have a 2 out of 10 gold, SGC 10 luminance from Chronicles, won't sell for 300, but my gold field level piece. Again, people are just funny with grading companies as well as to which they prefer, and obviously certain players.
I'd say a lot of that example there, though, is that tour is from, a low end set, Chronicles,
Yeah, exactly.
Print.
Exactly.
It's purely only rookies in there, and there are so many different sets within Chronicles itself, and that's a good example where, a field level select, much higher and much rarer. And in tiering, it's above the Chronicles. So, yeah, that's a good example of that.
Yep. This is a good comment as well. It goes to the same sort of point. How do you feel about people submitting to SGC to avoid those labels? Like, it's odd, right? Because if you're someone who's looking to buy something, people will see that SGC slab and not see those labels, right? So they'll place a greater preference on it, when in reality, just because it doesn't say it on the label doesn't mean that's what it is, right? You should be looking at the SGC label in comparison to how PSA might grade that card, right? You should be looking at that card individually, not necessarily what label it's in. So it's just interesting that people sort of fall for that trick, and it just comes down to human biases. It's not anything else. It's just how our brain works. Because we don't see it, we decide to place preference over one over the other, as an example. But
I think it's about as well, people are submitting to SGC over PSA to avoid those labels so that they do get a higher grade in general.
That's
right?
what I mean.
You see this with thicker cards, are you going to send it to PSA, you're going to send it to BGS. Everyone will normally send it to BGS because they've got more chance of getting a higher grade. So it's that visual appearance of it.
Which is weird, because if you're buying it, you should be looking at it through the same, you should be looking at it with that in mind, right? And people don't do that. It's just funny. A Pop 2 PSA 9 may actually be Pop 1 due to one. Exactly. You never know. There's actually some cards out there that have a bigger pop than the serial numbers within that card. So, like, it's not anything overly surprising. People don't like SGC. I just find it funny how people play graders against each other. Like, this is an interesting one as well. So you can go.
Oh, so I was going to say, personally, I'm not biased to, I keep my vintage stuff. I prefer, SGC for it. I like the tuxedo look. For thicker cards, I prefer BGS. I just think they look better in those slabs. And I think PSA look better for more modern sort of stuff. I'm not a bias to one or the other.
Yeah.
I do know about value though. Yeah.
Yeah. If I'm going to be selling something, I'm going to go for PSA just because of what people's general preference is. But I genuinely think that if you were to give every single grader the same volume that PSA has, and let's say they have the appropriate time to get people trained and all that sort of stuff, so you're not going to just flick the switch overnight, I still think PSA will be the most consistent. And that's just my gut feeling of the situation. People are saying SGC is doing a great job, but they're not really grading that many cards. So
put it in the same situation with the same volume. Yeah,
it doesn't excuse PSA at all, right? They should be doing a heck of a lot better than what they're doing right now, because their mistakes are ridiculous, especially some of the ones you're seeing. But you need to look at it through that lens. People think SGC is fantastic, which they are. I really like them as a business, but they're not that much better than PSA. Like, they're all the same. Is the point I'm trying to make. You should be treating them all as the same thing. SGC 10 is harder than a PSA 10 because they've got the gold label 10 as well, right? Which you hardly
they got the pristine gold label on top of that. Yeah.
Yeah.
But even then, I agree with Crown Jewels. I find that it's harder to get a PS an SGC 10 over a PSA 10 nowadays. But
yeah. But I wonder if that's because, similar to like BGS, where they just basically default their highest as being a 9.5 for the most part. Like, you see 10s come through, but it's like this own internal bias with them as a business.
Well, they've got the two 10s, right? They've got the SG, they've got the 10 and then the gold label,
Yeah. I have more than 50 one-of-ones of one of my PC guys, and they're probably all from 1 year too, the way things are going. I've got a couple of SGC slabs. I don't place a preference like you. It's more so just buying whatever is the right thing at the right price. And then because of the way I approach my collecting, like I said at the start, value doesn't really come into it too much.
Yeah.
Maybe you can jump through the next section now, unless there's a comment you want to bring up.
No, that's fine. Cool. So I think one of the things, just to bring up an example, and I think we're seeing this, I saw it on Sports Card Radio's live stream on Friday, the talk about backyard breaks. But I think, as breakers, they're encouraged and then they're told to act and play up a hit, whatever that might be. So thinking of those numbered cards, they've got to celebrate with whatever hit it might be. They get excited of, an out of 49 prism. And I'm just going to use prisms again for an example here, because it's the easiest one to do because everyone sort of knows it. Or, an out of 99 card, when, again, come back to what you said earlier, they're not that rare. It's the same principle as the sort of grading populations. So if we sort of look at the 2022 year and look at Paolo being the most recent sort of rookie of the year, again, if we use, Cardboard Connection, this is a sort of base set list of his. Right, so this is just the base set list. This doesn't include the inserts and the parallels of those, or the autograph inserts and stuff like that. So, what we see is you see people opening boxes, they enter breaks, they're hoping for a huge card. And in this example, let's say they pull an out of 99 Prism for Paolo. Now, normally, you consider that a huge card. And I'm guessing, Dan, you would yourself, if you got a 99, out of 99 Prism, the top rookie.
Yep.
I think most people would be like, wow, I've probably hit as good as I possibly could, right? There's not much better that you'd actually get it. Now, the scary thing with that really is that people don't even know or don't really want to consider how rare that card actually is. Like the grading, we need to consider, all those cards that are numbered lower. And I think this is what you're talking about before. And we did with the sort of LeBron example previously. Mm-hmm. But everything that's lowered number is actually part of that artificial rarity that we're seeing. So in this instance on the screen, if you're looking at Paolo's out of 99, I don't know if it's big enough for people to see, but, you've got that red power out of 75, the orange wave out of 60, the orange out of 49, pink pulsar out of 42, blue shimmer, purple pulsar, both out of 35, all the way down to the green shimmer out of 5 and the black out of 1. Now, that sounds like a lot already, but that's not even considering, the choice ones and the fast break and the sparkles that are there. You got the choice out of 88, the blue out of 49, the purple out of 20. Now, granted, that the base tends to sell higher than the fast break and those sort of variations of those. But just to look at, rarity wise, they're actually numbered lower than those other ones. We go all the way down and then we get to, the sparkle ones they brought in this year, sparkle gold out of 24, sparkle green out of 8, just, additional sets to increase the population there. Plus, the choice tiger, which is actually rarer. Now, when you look at that, the scary thing really is here that, there's actually sort of, 743 cards rarer than that purple out of 99. And again, that's excluding the choice tiger. Yep. So again, some people might say, hey, that's quite rare. There's only sort of, 743 lower plus my 90 out of 99. But as I said before, that's not even factoring in the large number of other sets that exist outside of Prism, and they're increasing every year too. So we start to say, hey, what about an optic gold out of 10? What about an optic blue, or purple out of 49 over there? What about those, immaculate base cards out of 10 or out of 25? What's more valuable, that or an out of 99 purple Prism? Yep. What happens if we went to the blue, the color match blue, which is out of 199? Can you imagine how many of those things exist?
Exactly. It just grows exponentially. It's wild how people sort of don't look at it through that lens. And again, like, people sort of like what they like, so they're going to buy that stuff and be excited for it. But again, from a collector's perspective, it's good because you can buy sort of what you want. But if you're somebody that's thinking that's going to be worth a heck of a lot of money long term, it's not just in the hope of that player basically achieving things that players before him that are in the Hall of Fame haven't achieved. But then it's also the volume of cards you need to compete with. And then also the population report, if these things do in fact get graded, because you're then competing against cards that may be graded better, especially in an era where literally everything is sleeved and slabbed immediately. So
exactly. And that's the thing, right? It's not to say, hey, don't buy these things. It's just making people aware of what they're spending now and how rare that's going to be in the end. So if we were to look at that purple, for example, what would you, and this is, I don't know if you've ever looked this up, but, what do you expect that to cost, as say a PSA 10? So like you said, nowadays, everything's sleeved and slabbed. Print quality is generally better, because people are getting them straight from the pack straight into it. But so a PSA 10, for someone like Paolo, he's won Rookie of the Year recently. What do you expect something like that to cost?
I wouldn't even know, to be honest, because I don't even look at those kinds of comps. But I'd imagine it'd be a lot more than probably what I'm thinking.
Yeah. So to give you an example. So here you go, just as an example, right? So 2,000 recent sales, right? So that's the out of 99 purple. Now, as I said before, what's the chances? And I'm not getting into the debate of LeBron and MJ here, because people, have their sides. They're both great. I think it's pretty clear that they're two of the best to ever exist in basketball. But what do you think the chances are, I guess, of Paolo having a similar career to LeBron James?
Yep. Next to
do you see any chance? Like probably exactly 0.1%, something like that. It's not really going to happen at all. So then we sort of take that and go, okay, what sort of multiplier do you think there should be or would be for a similar card of LeBron? So if we look back to LeBron's sets, not that many existed. an out of 99 for LeBron. So back then, most of his sets they were called gold. What do you sort of think something like that might cost?
Yeah, more.
Any guess?
Obviously.
Yeah.
No.
Yeah,
Or,
but again, but
below
not
five figures.
but not that much more. There you go. So
Okay.
granted, it's a slightly different grade, but again, back then it was much harder to get a high grade.
Yep.
Again, knowing that in 2022 there's many, many, many more sets compared to 2003. As I said,
Yep.
they've got a better print quality, so you expect there to be more PSA 10s.
Yep.
It's pretty crazy to think that, hey, you can get a LeBron, one of his true rookie cards, one of the greatest players ever, for sort of what, 3-4-fold. You might not have that sort of money to pay $8,000, but if you're paying $2,000 for a Paolo, chances are you probably can afford that.
Yeah, or stretch yourself a bit further to
Correct.
save up and get one, because that's always an interesting point as well. So it's actually less.
I was going to say, so which would you prefer? Yeah, which would you prefer?
LeBron. The LeBron.
Exactly. And I think if people saw it like this, they'd probably all sort of prefer the LeBron, right?
Yeah.
Once you get down to the out of 49s Paolos, they're probably similar cost.
Exactly. Which is a little bit scary to think about. But I think it's, again, pretty clear that the people that are sort of paying those prices maybe aren't doing it to hold for the long term, is people flipping them between each other. It's obviously, it's a different art now, buying cards to sell. But there are people out there that are seeing the $2,000 and saying, okay, I'm going to buy this because I can probably retire off the back of it, or be a little nest egg, or I want to invest in it. That's the people that this is sort of aimed at, is more so just being a bit more across, number one, comparative players, comparative cards. What does this player have to achieve in order for this card to be worth something like a LeBron? If in the back of your mind, like you said, this guy's going to be better than LeBron. Okay, well, what are LeBron's golds, or his serial numbered cards actually selling for from his rookie year? That's the comparison you need to make, and it's funny how people don't really do that.
Correct. You'll see, so Paolo's golds going for granted they're out of 10, but there's a lot more parallels that exist. They're going for sort of, $10 plus $1,000 US. Again, what's it going to look like if he doesn't have a career like LeBron? It can only go down. One of the things I sort of see, a lot of people think this is being negative. I'm not trying to be negative about it. They're still nice cards. The Paolo PSA 10, purple's a nice card. But I think what we're seeing is people are paying a lot for that artificial rarity that exists. It's not that rare, actually. It's just artificial rarity. At least looking at the gold out of 10, for example, there aren't that many that are numbered lower. Even though it's not that rare still, at least it's a lot rarer than an out of 99.
Yeah, for sure. And it's also an interesting one outside of rookie years too, that might be a bit of a spanner in the works, is, what's going to happen when Panini are no longer the main license holder anymore and it goes back to Topps? Like, what's that going to do to a lot of these prices that people I think are going to retain value long term for, multi-year cards, i.e. not rookie year cards, not final year cards, not championship winning seasons, or not cards, with a cool image or unique image or anything like that. Your stock standard 7th, 8th year player's card. What's going to happen to those when Panini sort of hits the dust?
Correct. And I think that leads into, and we can talk about it briefly if you want, before you wrap up, but LeBron, for example, right? That's what you're sort of saying. How many years does this exist before we even get into the Topps era and the Fanatics era? Looking at sort of, Optic and other sets, and again, using Prism example, how many years have there been? It becomes, I guess, more apparent too when we start looking at the career of a player and how long they play. If we look at someone like, say, LeBron, he and his gold Prism cards, for example, so ignoring Optic and other sets, how many sets have there been since 2012? I think when you talked about I gave you some figures on an orange, I think it was back then, but basically, if you're looking at a Prism gold, for LeBron, I'm pretty sure every single person will be over the moon. You've hit the jackpot. For LeBron, sure, you've probably made a nice payday depending on how much you sort of spent to get that, and that's if you sold. But what about long term and keeping those sort of cards? What happens when someone hits a 2022 Prism LeBron James gold wave numbered out of 10? What happens when collectors eventually wake up, and we're seeing it more and more nowadays, people starting to realize about the overprinting, but what happens when more and more people wake up to that artificial rarity that exists? That's an interesting sort of thing.
And those numbers,
and I guess
like you've got there.
Correct. And I think that's what we sort of see here, right? And that's what I mean by this, so if we look at, in 2022, we've sort of seen 3 different gold variants that exist, and gold's it's been the in thing sort of thing since the COVID era. It sort of died off a bit. But we sort of see 3 different gold variants nowadays in this year. So that's 30 gold cards for LeBron alone. If we go back into 2021, there was another 3 variants of gold, so another 30 cards. 2020 had 2, so another 20, and so on. So again, using that same sort of structure of numbers, if we look at a gold wave out of 10 from 2022, how rare is that really? People are going to argue with me and they'll go, it's LeBron and it's gold. Sure, I agree to an extent there. But as you always sort of, talk about, how sought after will a 20th year LeBron James gold prism card be in the future? It's an 11th year prism card. I don't see how that holds up compared to earlier years or all these other sets when there's that much population being produced. Is the demand going to be there? Is it going to be that rare? Is it going to be that sought after?
Yeah, and for someone like LeBron, it might be, but it's the other players that are then even more questionable. If you're starting to raise eyebrows around whether or not LeBron is going to be iffy, then what are the other players going to look like? And there's a comment here, not this one, but I'll bring it up anyway. Numbered cards being worthless. I don't think they're completely worthless, but I think it's like this is part of the conversation. I feel like the conversation is more people are paying too much for young players and vets. I think that's always been a problem, like I talked to a little bit earlier, and it seems to be exacerbated in recent years. But it's more so, okay, well, when you're looking at things holistically over the course of a player's career, which things are actually going to be tangible, which things are the collector's going to want? Because I said earlier, I see collectors as being the floor for pricing, right? The collectors are going to be the ones that are going to say, okay, well, if the market hits the fan, you've got 10 years of LeBron prisms on screen right now. Which one would I actually want? Well, as a collector and being a guy that PCs LeBron, I'm going to go for 2012 first, and then 2013, or what year did the Cavs win the league? Okay, I'm going to go for that year, and then all the other years would basically then fall by the wayside until they've all basically been bought up. But the collectors, who are the ones setting the price, essentially, are going to be picking the ones they have preference for, and it's those ones that I think the key message here is you need to be targeting, because those are the ones that are going to be sought after long term.
Correct. And I think one of the things that you mentioned before, if I could go back, what would I do? And I think, impulse buying is a big thing, right? If I sort of considered now, would I want a 2022 out of 10 gold wave prism of LeBron, which I saw one sell the other day for about $4,000 US, or would I prefer, an Ultimate Collection 2003 LeBron James rookie auto? To me, that's a simple thing. I'd much prefer a rookie auto that's from that 1 year. It's not going to be printed ever again because there was only that rookie year set that existed, or sets that existed, and the same price. It's pretty simple about which one's going to retain value long term. I think, again, that scary thing, there's been 170 different golds that have been produced just in Prism alone for LeBron since 2012. And again, that excludes any rarer cards than out of 10. So again, the blacks and those nebulas and all those other variants. But speaking of that, I guess, how many cards do you think, Dan, again, just off the top of your head, exist of those things that are lower than those golds for LeBron? Just since 2012.
At least another 100. It would have to be, right?
Yeah, good guess. Yeah, pretty much 200. So it's over 100. And again, that's crazy, right? Because people put that value on those golds out of 10 from that 10th year of Prism, or his 20th season, basically, and don't go, okay, hey, what about all those neon greens? What about all these other things that exist?
Yeah.
What if someone hit a pink pulsar prism out of 42 for LeBron James? I'm thinking that most people would think that's a huge hit. They'd be so excited, not realizing how many for 1 year plus across the broad range of years for prisms exist.
Yeah, and again, it's not meant to go to the point of don't buy these things, or you're selling for getting excited, or all that sort of thing. It's more so just putting the big picture in perspective, because people don't look at it through this lens. And you see, I guess the concerning part that I have is that people are maybe paying too much for things that they wouldn't be paying for if they stop back and take that.
Exactly. And that's all it is, right? Just awareness for people. You buy what you want in the end, but it's just being aware how sought after or how rare are these things actually, and is that money sort of worth that? And like you said earlier, sometimes it's good to look at and go, okay, what's someone who has a trajectory of the higher end of what a player could possibly get to? What's an equivalent card of their rookie year worth now? And you can sort of see there's normally a big difference. Ja Morant's another really good example. His first year Prism, he started with 30 golds coming from 2019. The way overprinting's been, that 30 will likely increase to whatever equivalent of Prism exists going forward. But, over 10 or 15 years, you're looking at 450 plus gold cards. And that's just from the base set, again, not even the highest end sets.
Yep. Yeah.
And again, I was just going to say that the other thing, this again on the screen, it is only the base card. Doesn't include all the variations that exist in Prism or autographs too, so you've got all these different insert sets of Prism as a whole, and there's gold variants of that, there's black variants of that, you've got all these different things within the Prism set itself. So you're looking at hundreds and hundreds and hundreds for every year for a player.
Yeah, and there's super short printed cards less than 10 as well, isn't there? So they're
Correct,
not factored
correct.
here as well because they're not numbered, so we don't know. Which
I haven't put Tiger in there or anything like that. Yep.
Yeah, which I hate. I hate that they have cards not numbered. I think it's dumb.
There's a reason for it, right? That they can print as much as they want without people knowing.
Well, you're seeing it with Kabooms, right? Because is it Kabooms and a few other inserts where they were meant to be really rare, the silver versions or base versions.
They used to
that
be
are now
Kabooms.
in every other pack or in every pack practically. It's just dumb what it allows them to do. And then again, people don't look at it through that lens, so they're paying money for things that maybe they wouldn't. Or there's probably cooler things you could be spending your money on, i.e. trying to chase something that has a piece of Game 1 jersey in there or something along those lines. But again, collectors are pretty funny with what they do like to buy and don't buy.
I think Jordan brought up a good point again in the chat, but basically around, again, like you've got with sets, there'll be tiering in sets, but then again, within sets, there'll be tiering of cards too. So if you're buying something to hope to get some monetary return in the long term, you have to buy something at the top of either the set tier or a tier within a set itself. And again, like I said, everyone wants to say they're in it for the hobby, but people will generally care somewhat about what they spend money on. So it's just factoring that into whatever you buy.
Yeah, or take the approach that I do where you're basically only buying things through profit, which makes things slow, but it sort of removes that risk for me completely. Because if I was to have a card all of a sudden that isn't desirable in 10 years' time when, maybe the market tanks, then if I sell it or I can't sell it, then I've already made my money back. Sucks that I could have sold it when it was at the peak and made even more money, but I just like to buy what I like, and I hate fluctuations in price sort of impacting me and all that sort of thing. So it's just an interesting one, and I'm keen to see what people have to say on it, as they start to think through it a little bit more. So there's a few other questions. Are you good to stay on for another 20 minutes or so?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, happy to answer some questions.
Perfect. So maybe questions
the take home though, like I said, is not being negative, not saying don't buy numbers, just be aware. If I could go back, I wish I knew these things back in 2019, 2020. And I think that's what people start to do as part of consolidation phase. They start to realize, hey, these aren't that rare actually. There's no true rarity there. Numbered cards are artificial rarity. It doesn't stop them putting a little number there to make you think they're rarer. They're the exact same card, just colored different. To me, that's not true rarity at all.
We've already seen that as well with people stopping with the whole base card situation. Because I think like when people talk about the hobby getting back to where it was maybe in 2020 when it was at its absolute peak, you're not going to see people make the same mistakes with the cards they were buying, because the people that are already here have already learned their lesson. And if the people that like came in and then left come back again, they've already learned. You're not going to see the whole thing basically be propped up with cards that are overprinted or nowhere near the realm of what they should have been paid for with those base cards.
Exactly, and that's what I was sort of saying before, right? I think people clued on about the base cards. I think the joke before about the 75,000 exists. Luca, how many has he got? 20,000 PSA graded PSA 10s plus another 15 BGS 9.5s just to the base card. And I think people, eventually realize, hey, they're not rare. But to me, that artificial rarity numbered cards, those real high numbered ones, say the out of 175 blues and stuff like that, that's the next thing to sort of that next domino to fall, basically. People start to realize that. And then poor people who thought they were buying something rare will be stuck with those things and just, either leave the hobby because they'll be upset about losing a lot of money or,
Yeah, which is the part that I'm not worried about, but the thing I want to try and not fix is maybe the wrong word, but the thing I want to try and educate on. I talk to it all in my videos, right? Because I sort of hate seeing so much misinformation out there about people at card shows and presenting things the way that they do. And again, it's not always nefarious or disingenuous. I just want this to be out there so people can sort of think through it and be like, okay, well, that makes sense. Or, if I am going to do this, let me try and do this instead and maybe make some money on the side to fund this, or let me maybe be a bit more targeted and all this thing. It's just interesting.
Just educating your audience, right? That's all
Yeah.
it's about. Just making sure people know what they're buying, because again, there is hundreds and hundreds of streamers out there, YouTube content creators, all the breakers you see, and they've got to say, hey, this is a huge hit, a huge card, blah blah blah. And that's just what they got to do to drive business, and that makes sense to me. But it's the poor customer who just as long as they're aware that what they're getting might not be that good, then that's fine.
Yeah. Right? The other thing with breakers as well that is a pet peeve of mine is them hyping up every single product like it's the best thing since sliced bread when it's
But they've got to, right? That's what they got to do. That's how they get their customers.
I know. It's just
so I try to, as part of the, just in general, you're right. Like I try to, speaking of like the state of the hobby, right? I try not to be naive. I know it's business. I know it's what they've got to do. Thinking back to, all the issues we're seeing in the hobby at the moment too. It's the same as any market, right? Whenever there's money involved, you get more issues. We're seeing more people come into the hobby, so that's kind of normal that you'd see more issues appearing too. More people involved, more issues are going to happen, more bad actors, those sort of things. And I think it's quite relative to the growth of the hobby. But I think it's just, I just try not to be naive about it.
Yeah, which is something that hopefully we can change with the people that consume this content as well. Speaking of bad actors, I had a comment earlier around the whole card porn situation. Was there anything you wanted to talk to on that?
Me?
Yeah.
I'm not the best to speak to that. I tend to get a lot of my information from yourselves and some other YouTubers that I watch. Again, I think
thoughts on the news and everything.
I think it's negative, and again, I think it's just like any market, though, right? Like art market, and I think cardboard's been involved in that too. But those sort of markets too, they've always got people like that. I think it's just understanding that, and again, not being naive to know those things will be happening. Understanding, let's look at the photo matching, understanding how that works, is it something that can be manipulated? Is it something that has a lot that exists? I think that's the kind of way I like to think about it. It's going to happen. Cool. So be it. I've got as the vintage sort of and pre-modern soccer markets, with the fakes there, I know it's going to happen. It's annoying to see, but you kind of just got to keep being accepting of it. Yeah.
It's just an interesting one. Again, you got a comment here from Bob. People complain about card porn coverage, need to put their complaining towards scammers. It's just a weird one that, I think rightfully so, people were caught off guard with the whole thing because it's absolutely wild, especially when you're looking at how some of these alleged scams were run, how systematic they were, and absolutely crazy, like straight out of a movie kind of thing. But people just need to learn that, it's like that in the world, right? Especially when it comes to big business and the amount of money that's in this hobby.
And I think, right, there's the right way of going about it, right? I think the problem is, and you don't have the biggest audience. A lot of people don't, but I think you mentioned the other week, if SCI was to talk about this stuff more, and I know he put out a video about card porn, if they spoke more about the card scammers out there and those sort of things, if you bring more awareness to it, it would get targeted more. But again, it's a negative lens on the hobby, and they're trying to be positive. I think the same thing comes back to breakers, for example. Putting content out there about them, it only does so much. People have to speak by not buying off them. I think Backyard Breaks, after that Trevor Lawrence gold kaboom scandal, got even bigger. After they didn't give that person that card that they said they would, that their audience grew even more. So it's clearly something that just people don't really seem to care too much about.
Yeah, I think for breakers, it's going to get. I think it's going to be out of their hands and out of my hands to call this kind of stuff out, because I think it's going to be regulators that are going to be the ones that drive it, especially with Fanatics Live. They've basically got their IPO lined up. In terms of the regulations that'll be required to report under, is going to mean that stuff like this won't fly. So it's not. I think when shit hits the fan in the breaking industry, I think a lot of people are going to be looking at Backyard Breaks saying, "You killed my business." Because you guys are a bunch of idiots, and I think it's going to be something that we look back on in a few years' time.
I agree. It's
definitely coming.
I was just looking at some of the comments there. I think the one around Lanyard Dude about the autographs. I've got an interesting view on autograph cards. You kind of, anyone who's sort of signing nowadays, they've got how many more years of signing cards going forward, right? If a card's not a rookie year card, that has some sort of significance around it, how many more cards are they going to sign? Going to be hundreds and hundreds and hundreds across different products, different sets. So what does that mean in terms of value going forward? There's going to be, 15, 20,000 autographs. Look at Zion, for example, how many there are. At least the Tom Brady thing, at least, again, who's better in the NFL, right? he's a clear number one, maybe Montana's number two, whatever that might be. Whether Mahomes ever catches him, it's unlikely still, like I said before. But, at least having something of his, an autograph, is a lot bigger than having something of, again, a Zion or a Ja Morant.
Yeah. But the
We're
whole
still
thing
going to keep signing.
Yeah, exactly. Because you see it a lot with some NBA players. Like I think Clyde Drexler has a lot of stuff signed. There's a few other Hall of Famers that have so many signatures out there, especially on-card autos, where the cards themselves are like very cheap, $30-$40 for a card for an on-card auto for Hall of Famers. It's crazy to me. It's good for me to buy, but that's the other thing that needs to be kept front of mind as well. Again, buying a card that's got a bit more sentimental value behind it, which is why, like, for me, it's all about going for game one stuff, match one stuff, something that I can tie to a game. One of my favorite things to do with match one stuff is to actually try and photo match
find which game it was.
Which I told you I did with that Gianluigi Buffon that I ended up losing, but I spent like 3 whole days trying to find that jersey, and I did find it. I'm not going to tell anyone which jersey it's from in case it comes up for sale again. But that's a really fun thing to do as well, and it goes back to the point of, as a collector, as somebody that's PCing, that's the stuff that excites me. That's the stuff that I'm going to try and chase long term. Tom Brady only signs with Fanatics now. I think LeBron has got the exclusive contract with them, doesn't he now?
I think he's changing to Fanatics. Yeah, no, I don't think it's confirmed yet, but I think he's heading that way, right? And again, though, that I think they're looking at a tiered approach. They're totally different, right? The value of their autographs overall will still hold better than someone who's a mediocre player, or even a low level. Russell Westbrook. Granted, I love him. A lot of people hate him, but his cards are never going to hold up. His autos, even though he's an upper deck signer only too, since Top Chrome days, he's never going to be worth that. Even if he's just not at that upper echelon, it just will never retain value. They'll only go down, except for unique things like potentially those rookie autos and stuff like that.
Especially with like how the general consensus thinks of him now, all the younger guys in the hobby only look at him through that lens of his Lakers run. So
which is it's good for me. Good for me. Bad for
good for you to buy. Especially some of those. You should trace Kevin for some of those nice ones that showed up on his page.
I know. I've got a couple of my nice ones here for you. I said, like, going back to the Topps Chrome sort of thing, right?
Yeah.
And again, like, going to what you like and those things from the rookie and what you can get. I guess my favorite sort of card is a gold refractor. Is right, simple. Iconic set. KD the year before, for example. Iconic set there. Steph Curry, iconic set. They've all had iconic sets across.
What are the golds out of? Are they at 50?
50 back then. Yeah. There's rare. There's red out of 5, for example. I've had a chance to get one of those. And there's some higher sort of variations too. But to me, just having one of those sort of things that's simple and it is, rare compared to nowadays.
Yeah. This is an interesting comment. Only Topps Chrome autos are going to hold value. I'm really curious to see, number one, not which Panini products are going to hold value when Topps get the licenses, but also which Topps licenses from the past are going to, or which card releases from the past are going to all of a sudden come back and be valuable again. And
be popular again.
Yeah, because you saw a huge drop off when Panini came on board, aside from a select few sets. But people are weird, so you might see, maybe it'll be different now because the Panini era was so prevalent, obviously, when people basically came into this hobby over the last few years. So maybe there's enough there to maintain the value. But if we see what we saw when it went from Topps and Upper Deck
Topps
to
Panini,
like I think you're going to see maybe some top sets come back as well. But again, no real thought process behind that opinion. But that's just an interesting one. See what other comments are here. I think this is a good one to remember as well. Not everything will hold value. That's okay. Like, the cards are about collecting at the end of the day, so who really cares?
Just be aware that whatever you spend on it, as long as if it goes down, that you're happy with it, right? And just know that a lot of things will, and just being aware of that.
Yep. I don't think there was anything else on my list. Was there anything else you wanted to talk to or bring up?
No, that's it. Just again, it's just general awareness, right? Like I said, a lot of people take it as a negativity sort of thing, and it's not the case. Just be aware of what you are buying. And how that tracks, over time, right? As you know, I'm in data and analytics, so I care a lot about trends and looking back at things. Taking someone of a equivalent caliber, what their sort of, goal, for example, from 5 years ago now sells. If we look at Jokic, you said before he doesn't get much love, but someone like him, what his, who's won 2 MVPs, a title, what he looks like in terms of value, and will, Paolo again. I like Paolo as a player, but will Paolo ever get to that point? If he does, cool, that might be equivalent sort of value for him. If he doesn't, what's that going to mean?
Exactly. There's a good comment here. Stop buying mystery packs.
I was about to say.
This is a huge pet peeve of mine, and the biggest problem that I have is that I'd say 99% of them don't have a freaking checklist. And if they don't have a checklist, you shouldn't be buying it.
There's a reason why they don't have a checklist. Yes,
I know. And there's, Australia's biggest retailer for cards doesn't have one for any of their products, and it does my freaking head in. And I hate it. There's no reason why it shouldn't be there, right? You price out your product off the back of the checklist. So just put it out there for people to know before you go ahead and buy it. It's just, I hate it. Especially also, you see some videos on YouTube sometimes where guys go to card shows and they are doing the walk around before the show's even open, and they offer to buy every single repack off the table, and the seller doesn't want
and they won't sell it to them. Exactly.
Yeah. Because there was a famous one. I think there was a LeBron auto or Jordan rookie in one set, and the guy worked out that if he was to buy every product, it would still be worth out to be profitable for him. And didn't want to sell it, and he basically
again naivety, right? People don't realize that 99% of those mystery packs are scams, right? The card's not in there, or they know which pack it's in, and you're not getting that pack. It's going to someone they know.
As we saw the Sports Card Radio live the other day, there's a comment here from the start that maybe you could quickly talk to, and that I forgot to come back to, about all your pops in the background. You can see, I see many pops in the collection. Was there anyone who talked on that?
No, they're just, like I said, a money pit, really. Nothing rare there. I collect things
before we went live. That they were,
I collect things I like.
Context. Yeah.
Russell Westbrook ones, basketball ones, and Curry, Jordan, and then a whole lot of music ones and Star Wars. So there's, I would choose not to spend too much on those. Just more for a collection.
Yeah. And just to come back to this, so again, it's not meant to say that. Same with breakers, right? Breakers get a bad name because of the basically dickheads out there that are sort of ruining it for them. There's a lot of people out there that put together really good repacks that get ruined because there's people out there that want to try and deceive, and it comes down to things not putting out a checklist, preventing people from buying all the product from their table, or doing some dodgy stuff that you saw in that Sports Card Radio live. The bad actors are sort of ruining it for everyone in every asset or facet of life, I should say, or let alone within this industry. So that's the downside. That's the stuff that annoys me, because I say it all the time, the barrier to entry to scam people in this industry is so low that you almost get everyone and anyone doing it, and they're scamming people left, right, and center. No matter how much education you see out there, it's happening, and they're doing it because it works. So,
yeah, exactly.
Let's see what else there is. Otherwise, I can wrap up. Again, they're not all dishonest liars. I think there's definitely good ones out there. A lot of the OGs are pretty good as well. Like I give Cherry Collectibles some heat all the time for some of the way they approach things like mystery packs, or how they set prices for their cards, or how they set prices when they're buying cards from people. But from a breaking perspective, I've been on a number of streams with them, because I used to break with them back in 2015 quite heavily, and there were people that got themselves into trouble, right, financially, and Grayson was always willing to sort of give that individual support, or would do things like check in on their welfare, or do things like ban them from being able to buy from their breaks. And that includes credit cards, and not just banning the username and going off the username. They would ban their credit cards and stuff like that, which is a really good thing to do, and not a lot of breakers would do stuff like that. You watch these streams and they sort of push the product on them like it's a drug, and they basically trying to say, just buy one more. There's a lot of good guys out there that don't do that.
Yeah.
So they're not all bad. Again, I think that's like most industries on YouTube. If you watch in the comic book space, video game space, it's the same kind of thing, because a lot of this stuff are not actual crimes at the end of the day. Like, you're talking about small amounts of money, unless you're talking about the really crazy stuff with this whole card porn situation, or some of these, soccer syndicates with those fake cards that PWCC love to list on their platform. It is what it is.
And Golden too, actually. There's been some lately on Golden, So
I feel like Golden are a lot better at taking stuff down, though. I'm not.
Yeah, I think they're more responsive to people. Same as grading companies, right? There's certain grading companies that will action things, I guess, really quick when there are fakes spotted and stuff like that. But
yeah, you can't scam me on the scammer. Well, everyone knows you're a scammer now. So this is an interesting one as well. I don't know how true that actually is in terms of how interrelated they actually were. I know the individual popped into that store a number of times and they've maybe helped each other out here and there, but I think it's more so just business relationships than anything else. The one thing to keep front of mind with what Card Porn was doing was they seem to be in bed with a lot of people just based off of good relationships, not dealing with all these people. So without more information coming to light, I don't know how involved they actually are. But if they are, that'll come to light.
Yep.
Any other comments you want me to bring up?
No, I'm good. Someone asked you if you had enough money, would you buy all the Ken Griffey rookies that existed in PSA 10 and burn them all except for one?
Maybe.
Again, that's a card.
It's a ridiculous number, right?
Yeah, 2,000. He said PSA 10s, but overall there's something like 80,000 plus graded. Like it's just massive, right? But again, that's an iconic card. So to most people, who grew up watching baseball, they love Ken Griffey Jr. and that's his card. So, a lot of people want to own one of those grades, whatever that might be. And it's purely for that nostalgia and remembering how good he was, not for the investment itself.
I'm surprised not more people have done that, to be honest. Try to corner a market like that with higher end cards. I'm not sure. Do you ever see Alpha Investments on YouTube?
No, I do see. I see people on Instagram who have cornered markets, whether it's deliberate or not. They will own 25 of a certain player in the PSA 10s because that's who they like. I don't know if they're trying to corner the market in terms of being able to change prices. Because
he's quite big in the Magic the Gathering space. He's a good channel. He's got like 300,000 subs. Talks to things from an investment perspective. He used to be an IB or investment banker, and he's done a lot of that stuff with the original like Alpha and is it Alpha and Beta?
Beta,
yeah.
All those Mox Emeralds and Mox Rubies and stuff.
He's got like huge populations of a lot of those key cards from those key sets, and he basically has the market almost cornered for a lot of stuff.
You can control the demand then, right? And control how much you let out there.
So he gets a lot of hate for it. A lot of people hate him because they think he's a pump and dumper and all that sort of stuff. But I'm surprised you haven't seen that in the sports card space, like with people trying to buy all the Jordan rookies as an example, or maybe something a bit more affordable.
How many did Probstein have of the?
Yeah, the PSA? He's got 30, right? He's got 30, I think. So yeah, and I think that's a good point to remember as well. Repacks usually the cards they can't sell, so they just throw them in and charge a top dollar, which is why the checklist is important because. Like obviously, if you're building a repack, you need to have some cheaper cards in there because you can't put every single card in there worth more than the price of the repack itself because then it defeats the purpose of you putting the repack together. You're not going to make money, but you just need to be more sensible with what it is you're buying. You've got a bunch of redemptions out still, don't you?
I do. I've still got a 15 I'm waiting on from Panini. I wish they'd got one coming tomorrow finally, which is great. But 15 of them have been there for multiple years. Not holding much hope.
Are you going to ask for replacements for any of them? Or
I've asked pretty much every single day for the last 8-9 months. I'll email them.
You could have got those Ronaldo impeccable cards. That'd have been nice.
Yeah, well, I did. As I said to you before you did that video, I did get a Ronaldo impeccable, a different set, earlier set the year before. Yeah, I got one of the numbered ones. That's right. Yes, United. What was it? 89, 98, whatever the card is. I got one of those as a replacement for something. Which was actually from the next set. So
that whole situation is still wild to me that they were handing out active redemption cards as replacements to other people. That seems so fraudulent, and the fact that you don't hear anything about that at all is just wild to me. I don't.
But again, right? The only way you hear something about it is people stopping buying from them, right? The customers all go, "Hey, we've had enough." Happen. No.
Yeah. All right, perfect. I think we can wrap it up there. So I really appreciate having me, or not having me on, you joining the channel.
not a problem.
I'm too used to being the guest. Sorry. But yeah, was there anything else you wanted to share before we wrapped up?
No, that's it. That's it. Thank you. Just said it again. It's not about the negativity or telling people what not to buy or anything like that. It's just saying, hey, be aware of these things. Take some time, consider how rare something is, look at how many others exist, and what sort of similar things sell for in previous years. So,
yep, perfect. And where can everyone find you on social?
Russ. I think it's Russ_Westbrook_cards. I would personally wouldn't go there unless you like Russell Westbrook, because that's all it is. So
And there's some nice cards there, so do check it out. I'll add the link down below and I'll pin it in the top
I'm
comments.
always happy to talk to people. Anyone who comes through there and talking about anything to do with numbers and analytics and data and stuff like that, always happy to talk to people about that.
And also, if you've got any Westbrook cards, sell them to your man. You can make a fortune. All right, cool. Cheers. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Okay, it should be ending now.